Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, where we are featuring the all-new 2022 Honda Civic. This is the 11th generation for the Honda Civic, which is crazy to say, and it's kind of a big deal when a new generation Civic comes out because they sell a ton of these. You see them all over the place. So Honda has to get this right, and so far, from what I've seen, I really like it. What do you guys think of the styling? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I think it's a bit of a departure from the last generation. Last generation was a little busier, kind of a little more stylized, but to my eyes, I kind of prefer this. This is, I don't want to call it subdued or conservative, but it is definitely cleaner, and it's definitely going to, in my opinion, age a little bit better than the last generation. I mean, this is just a look that I think will work for a long time. I certainly see some Accord in the front end here, but it's not exactly like, you know, the Audi products where it's just the smaller or bigger version of the same car and they look identical. It looks different enough. And you know, the back of the car with this line running down the side actually kind of reminds me a little bit of an A3. The proportions, what they've done by moving the A-pillar down or what they've done with these fender gaps and everything, it does look a little more athletic, and it kind of makes it look like a bigger car than it actually is. So it has some presence to it and actually kind of feels like a lot of car for the money. Now this color is called Morning Mist, and I wouldn't call it necessarily a snooze fest, but I would have preferred them to go with a little more bold color for the press launch that we're on to get your eyes popping a little bit more. We're going to be driving two different models today, the Sport model and the Touring model. The Sport model comes with the 2-liter naturally aspirated engine. The Touring model comes with a 1.5-liter turbocharged engine. And we'll get more into the differences as this video goes on, but you may see me switch between the two cars, shots of the two cars, willy-nilly in the video. We only have a limited amount of time with this vehicle today, so let's get going. Let's hop in the interior and then we're going to take it for a drive. Before we go for a drive, I want to talk about this all-new interior because there's some really cool touches and really nice details that they've spent time thinking about in here. You know, first and foremost, I would say the quality of the materials and finishes is up from previous generations. You definitely feel that. This interior design matches the exterior design. It's sleek, it's simple, it's very easy to use. We'll talk more about the infotainment here in a bit, but I want to talk about this honeycomb grille that runs across the length of the dash. Really cool touch. You know, hides these HVAC vent controls, and you know, you can adjust them with these knobs. Really cool and unique thing, like what they did there. They've done a good job to minimize the piano gloss black plastic that we always complain about, that gets smudges and everything like that. There is still a little bit here on the steering wheel, which makes me wonder why, and then a little bit running across the dash, but it's minimal, which I appreciate. And in the center console, they've gone to this new material instead of the piano gloss plastic, so it will reduce smudges or eliminate smudges. I'm not sure what I think about it. I don't think it's bad. It's not my favorite thing ever, but it's a unique approach to, you know, continuing to use plastic in these places, but making it so that it's not, you know, going to pick up and show grossness of fingerprints so much. It's actually textured as well. Some other small things worth mentioning: they've clearly put effort into making these buttons and switches feel like they have nice tactile feedback. Well, now I just pressed a million buttons and I think I just ruined everything. But it's not quite German quality as far as, you know, the positivity of the buttons and some of these knobs and everything. They feel a little bit more upscale than entry level. Going to the infotainment screen, very similar to what Honda's been doing, but it does seem to react quite quickly. I don't know if the processing power is up or whatnot, but that was one of my complaints of some of the older systems, is that they kind of just took forever to get going. But navigation, the sound system in this is the Bose. This is a Touring model, and it sounds fantastic, excellent clarity. And then finally with the Touring model, all digital gauge cluster, which is a nice touch. I think a well-implemented digital gauge cluster is fantastic. It provides you a lot of customizability. And in the center, you know, when these Touring models, it has this little icon for you, very Tesla-esque, you know, where it shows you on the road and it'll show cars around you, it'll show lanes, Once again, if you've been in a Tesla, you'll have noticed that, and it's clearly taking a page out of their book. But pretty cool little touch, and the self-driving aids, which we'll talk about on the drive, are pretty good as well. As we set out to go for a drive here, you'll notice that the steering, once you get going, it actually is a little bit on the heavier side. Not by any means uncomfortable or too much, but it is a little bit on the heavier side. This car Honda will try and tell you, and they've tried to tell us, you know, the Civic is about fun, sportiness, but the suspension is definitely tuned more towards comfort. That's not to say that it handles horribly in these twisties here, but the steering is, you know, vague. It's accurate, but vague. No, I don't think anyone expects a whole bunch of steering feel in a base Civic, so we can totally give them a pass on that. But it's very fluid, which I do like, and I think most people buying this car, that's really all they'll care about, is that it's fluid. And going back to the suspension, soaks up bumps really well without being too soft and wallowy. Not too much body roll, really excellent body control just in general. And furthermore, you know, it's actually really quiet in here, especially for the segment. It feels incredibly insulated from the outside environment. I mean, this feels more up class than you would expect for this price. Wind noise is low, road noise is pretty low, and you know, Hondas tend to have this, as far as build quality, pretty good. Definitely not quite German build quality, but the solidity is definitely there, better than a lot of the Korean cars that I've driven. So overall, you know, these things kind of add up to a very refined experience. It's worth noting as well that this has the 1.5 liter turbocharged engine. The lower tier models get the naturally aspirated 2 liter engine, and maybe this is down a little bit compared to some of the competitors. It's okayly adequate as far as power goes. They have changed the CVT programming. I like the programming that they've basically put into this. It's kind of a mix between a traditional CVT and a traditional transmission, in the sense of it does give you simulated gears, but it does also act kind of like a regular CVT, where it will kind of like hold for a while and not kind of like sweep through the entire rev range. These seats are okay. Honda claims that they've put a lot of effort into these seats. Maybe it's just my fit, so I would say go and sit in them and see how they feel to you. But to me, they lack a little bit of lumbar support, which is something that I'd really like. And this is the touring model, and it doesn't have any of that. I will say, however, though, the seating position is great. It lets you get super low in the car, and if you want, you can raise the seat up super high if you like to be sitting high up. Plenty of airiness feeling, excellent visibility, a lot of glass. It's an excellent package, and as you would imagine, I mean, Honda sells so many of these, so they have to get it right. We are now in the Sport model, and some of the differences between the Sport, which is sort of in the middle of the range, and some of the upper tier models is, first and foremost, this is a 2 liter naturally aspirated engine as opposed to the 1.5 liter turbocharged engine in the other model, and you definitely get some more torque in that turbocharged engine. Like, I'll put my foot down here. It sounds a little bit more weed eatery with the 2 liter, although you know, with the 1.5 liter, still a 4-cylinder and still isn't like the most inspiring sound ever, but at least that engine has a little bit more torque. This isn't horrible, but it is pretty slow in the grand scheme of things, but you're still getting a lot of the quality that you got in the touring model, in just the form of the suspension and sort of the build quality. You do lose out on some features, though. This is a 7-inch screen instead of a 9-inch screen, and it's completely different. It doesn't have the navigation. The menu structure is different. Still just as easy to use, but you do miss out on that. You also miss out on the all digital gauge cluster. This is half digital gauge cluster. So you have a analog gauge on the right for your speed, and on the left you have the tachometer, where you can also kind of customize that area. The last thing that we should talk about are the driver aids, because these are becoming obviously very big in the industry. Obviously with Tesla pushing the edge with quote-unquote self-driving, everyone's trying to get on board with more driver aids. So lane centering, lane keeping in this, adaptive cruise control. I love how that's just getting into cheaper versions of cars now. Adaptive cruise is so amazing to be able to maintain the distance between you and a car in front of you without having to constantly mess with the cruise. It just does it for you. And it works flawlessly in this car. You can adjust that distance, how far you want it to keep out or how close. I'll turn the lane centering on here. It works pretty well. I used it on Highway 1. I'm using it here. You still very much need to drive this car. Make no mistake, it's not a self-driving car. It gets in situations all the time where it doesn't really know what's going on with the lines, but it's a step in the right direction. It's a nice guide. I think it's a decent backup, but you still need to have that focus of being the person in control driving the car, even though as the car is doing right now, it kind of takes the wheel from your hand a bit and will do a pretty good job of staying in the center lines. It doesn't bounce around a ton like some of the early generation cars. Honda in this generation has improved the camera and some of the software that they used for these advanced driving features, and has a little wider field of view. So it does feel like kind of the next step. It feels a little bit more refined than the previous generation. So, a car loaded with tech, a car that is super quiet and serene. I think that's mostly who wants to buy this is interested in a quality sound system and a peaceful ride, so you can kind of be insulated from the environment. Not a ton of fun going on here, but no one really expects that from a base model Civic, I don't think. And really it boils down to, do you like the styling? I mean, once again, the styling is quite different than the last generation car, and to me, I like it. I prefer the styling of this vehicle. It's a lot cleaner, and I think it's going to age better. It's going to be a little more timeless. I think that last generation Civic, no offense to the people that own it, plenty of people like the way it looks, but I don't think that ages very well. It's a very busy design. So yeah, this is a fantastic car. Everything you would expect from Honda to get right for a car, one of the best selling cars in America. So thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Let me know what you think in the comments below of the all-new Civic. It's a big deal, and I will look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Peace.